Chapter 14, Dr. Dorian. The next day was Saturday. Fern stood at the kitchen sink drying the breakfast dishes as her mother washed them. Mrs. Arable worked silently. She hoped Fern would go out and play with the children instead of heading for Zuckerman's barn to sit and watch the animals. "Charlotte is the best storyteller I ever heard," said Fern, poking her dish towel into a cereal bowl. "Fern," her mother said sternly, "you must not invent things. You know spiders don't tell stories. Spiders cannot talk." "Charlotte can," replied Fern. "She doesn't talk very loud, but she talks." "What kind of story did she tell?" asked Mrs. Arable. "Well," said Fern, "she told us that a cousin of hers caught a fish in her web. Don't you think it's fascinating?" "Fern, dear, how would a fish get caught in a spider's web?" "You know that couldn't happen. You are making this up." "Oh, it happened all right," said Fern. "Charlotte never fibs. This cousin of hers built a web across a stream. One day she was hanging out on the web, and a tiny fish leaped in the air and got tangled in the web. The fish was caught by one fin mother. Its tail was wildly thrashing and shining in the sun. Can't you just see the web sagging dangerously under the weight of the fish? Charlotte's cousin kept slipping in, dodging in and out, and she was beaten mercilessly over the head by this wild thrashing fish, dancing in, dancing out, throwing—" "Fern," snapped her mother, "stop it. Stop inventing these tales." "I'm not inventing," said Fern. "I'm just telling you the facts." "What finally happened?" "Charlotte's cousin won. She wrapped up the fish, then she ate him when she got good and ready. Spiders have to eat, same as rest of us." "Yes, I suppose they do," said Mrs. Arable. "Charlotte has another cousin who is a balloonist. She stands on her head, lets out a lot of line, and is carried aloft in the wind. Mother, wouldn't you just simply love to do that?" Yes, I would," she said. "But Fern, darling, I wish you would just play outside today instead of going to the barn. Find some of your playmates and do something nice outside. You're spending too much time in that barn. It is not good for you to spend so much time alone." "Alone?" said Fern. "Alone? My best friends are in that barn. It's a very sociable place, not at all lonely." Fern disappeared after a while, walking down towards Zuckerman's. Her mother dusted the sitting room, and as she worked, she kept thinking about Fern. It didn't seem natural for a girl to be so interested in animals. Finally, Mrs. Arable made up her mind that she would call Dr. Dorian and ask his advice. She got in the car and drove to his office in the village. Dr. Dorian had a thick beard. He was glad to see Mrs. Arable and gave her a very comfortable chair. "It's about Fern," she said. "Fern spends entirely too much time at the Zuckerman's barn. It doesn't seem normal. She sits on a milk stool in the corner of the barn cellar near the pig pen and watches the animals hour after hour. She just sits and listens." Dr. Dorian leaned back and closed his eyes. "How enchanting," he said. "It must be nice and quiet down there. Homer has some sheep, doesn't he?" "Well, yes, but it all started with that pig that we let Fern raise on a bottle. She calls him Wilbur. Homer bought the pig, and ever since it left our place, Fern's been going near it." "I've been hearing things about that pig," said Dr. Dorian, opening his eyes. "They say he's quite a pig." "Have you heard about the words that appear in the spider's web?" "Yes," said the doctor. "Do you understand it?" "Understand what?" "Do you understand how there can be writing in a spider's web?" "No," said the doctor. I don't understand it. But for that matter, I don't really understand how a spider can spin a web in the first place. When the words appeared, everyone said they were a miracle, but nobody pointed out that the web in itself is a miracle." "What's miraculous about a spider's web?" said Mrs. Arable. "I don't see why you say a web is a miracle. It's just a web." "Ever try to spin one?" said Dr. Dorian. Mrs. Arable shifted uneasily in her chair. "Nope, but I can crochet a doily and I can knit a sock." "Sure," said the doctor. "But somebody taught you, didn't they?" "Well, my mother taught me." "Well, who taught the spider?" "A young spider knows how to spin a web without instructions of anyone. Don't you regard that as a miracle?" "Well, I suppose so," said Mrs. Arable. "I never looked at it that way. Still, I don't understand how the words got into the web. I don't understand it, and I don't like that I don't understand it." "None of us do. I'm a doctor. Doctors are supposed to understand everything, but I don't understand everything, and I don't intend to let it worry me." Mrs. Arable fidgeted. "Fern says the animals talk to each other, Dr. Dorian. Do you think animals talk?" "I never heard one say anything," he said, "but that proves nothing. It's quite possible that an animal has spoken civilly to me and I didn't catch the remark because I just wasn't paying attention. Children pay better attention than grown-ups. If Fern says the animals in Zuckerman's barn talk, I'm quite ready to believe her. Perhaps if people talked less, animals would talk more. People are incessant talkers. I give you my word on that." "Well, I feel better about Fern," said Mrs. Arable. "You don't think I need to worry?" "Does she look well?" "Well, yes." "Is her appetite good?" "Oh, yes, she's very hungry." Does she sleep well at night? Yes. Then don't worry. Do you think she'll ever start thinking about something besides pigs and sheep and geese and spiders? Well, how old is she? 8? Well, I think she's always going to love animals, but I doubt that she'll spend her entire life in the barn cellar. How about boys? Does she know any boys? She knows Henry Fussy, said Mrs. Arable. Dr. Dorian closed his eyes again and went into deep thought. Henry Fussy, he said. Remarkable. Well, I don't think you've said anything to really worry about. Let Fern associate with her friends in the barn. I would say offhand spiders and pigs were as fully interesting as Henry Fussy. Yet I predict that one day even Henry will drop some chance remark that catches Fern's attention. It's amazing how children change year to year. How's Avery? Oh, Avery. Avery's always fine. He gets into poison ivy and stung by wasps and bees and brings frogs and snakes home and breaks everything he puts his hands on. He's fine. Good, said the doctor. Mrs. Arable said goodbye and thanked Dr. Dorian very much for his advice, and she felt greatly relieved.